There is no justifying, contextualizing. What happens on October 7th is not complicated.
We have a long fight ahead of us.
Here I am.
Here I am.
Here I am. And here I am.
Here we are.
Here I am.
Here I am with Shai Davidai.
My guest today is a multi-award winning actor and activist. So here I am with Ari Axelrod.
And here I am with Shai Davidai.
I am so glad that you came. I'm so glad we're doing this. And I'm going to start. You know, before I start with the question, have you listened to the podcast or just watched the clips on it?
I've
social
watched
media?
clips.
Good. So all of this is going to be a
all the
surprise for
Yes,
you.
yes.
Perfect. I love it. So the first question that I ask every person is this. Ari Axelrod, what kind of a Jew are you?
I am a Jew who lives my life not to make Goyim comfortable, but instead I live my life to make my ancestors proud.
How do you do that?
By actively using my voice, both singing and not, to be the voice for the voiceless, for my ancestors who happened to live during a time where they could not speak freely. They could not speak freely without the fear of something happening to them because they were Jews. And I feel lucky that I live in a time where anti-Semitism, while on the rise now, for the majority of my life, I didn't fear for my safety as an American Jew by living my life proudly and outspoken. So to be able to recognize that privilege and be the person and do the things that my ancestors were not able to be and do. And really actively thinking about doing that every day. So going to shul, even if I don't believe in God, but going to shul and saying the prayers that they wanted to say but couldn't because for whatever reason they couldn't go to the shul that they wanted to go to, or they couldn't walk there freely, or hosting Shabbat dinners with my friends and imbuing that with a sense of vitality because I live in a time where I'm able to do that, and I do it for my ancestors who couldn't.
Have you always been that kind of Jew? Have you always done this? Is this new?
No.
So what were you before? When was the tipping point, and then what are you now?
Great question. I was raised as a conservative Jew in the Midwest. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Always a Zionist. My parents met in a Zionist youth movement when they were 14. They went on a year course together when they were 18. They got married at 22. So Israel and Zionism was always a big part of my life. But the Jewish identity aspect was really, for me personally, was rooted in what I was raised to believe, what I was raised to do, what I was raised to practice, and not necessarily mined from a place within myself. Like, what does it mean to me? And there was a moment really after my freshman year of college. I went to a small university in St. Louis that was founded by nuns, and there were a handful of Jews, none as outspoken as I was. So I really did feel very alone in my Jewish identity. It was the first time I felt alone because Ann Arbor, where I'm born and raised, is a very vibrant Jewish community with the university, and so I felt very held by that community. And then going to college and feeling like I was the only Jew, it was very hard. It became actually quite painful to be a Jew, and so I actually kind of took a step back and I thought,
what painful in what way?
and that I had to defend who I was in ways that other people didn't have to. I had to fight to get kosher meals. I had to demand that I be allowed to miss class for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And even when I was granted the opportunity to miss class by the dean of the department, my acting teacher freshman year, I love that this is on the record, my acting teacher freshman year when I was at Hillel, on Rosh Hashanah, I got a Facebook message from her. It's very professional. A Facebook message that said, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm in synagogue. It's Rosh Hashanah. And she said, "You should have gotten permission." And I said, "I did get permission." And she said, "But not from me. We'll talk about this tomorrow." And the next day in class, she made an announcement in front of the entire class and said, "We don't make exceptions for any religion, period." Now, as we look forward to Christmas break, it's like, what? Hold on. So just fighting to be able to go to shul, fighting to be able to have.
By the way, it's like you don't have to make exceptions for any religion. This 1964 civil rights law makes exceptions for ethnic, national origin, and religion.
Right. But if you're going to talk about Christmas break, if you're going to have rehearsals on Saturday morning so that everyone can go to church on Sunday, then you are making exceptions for religions, just not my religion.
Yes.
And so to fight, I was not equipped to be an activist at that time. I didn't know how to do that. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready. And it was just so overwhelming that I was tired of fighting. I got tired really quickly. And so I stopped, and that gave me the opportunity to reflect and think, oh, okay, I have to fight for my Jewish identity, but what am I fighting for? What do I believe? Maybe the Judaism that I was raised in is not my version of Judaism. Maybe those aren't the roots. The roots that were assigned to me at birth maybe aren't my own roots. And so the summer after my freshman year, I kind of took a step back and I distanced myself from it. And then I went to a church for actors, and I went and I sat with Buddhists who were, chanting Hare Krishna in the park, and just wanted to see what else was out there. And I went to my rabbi that at the shul that I was raised in, right before I went back to school, my sophomore year, and I said, I don't know if I believe in God. And he said, yeah, me neither. I was like, I'm sorry, I thought that's like part of your job description. And he said, no, I also don't know if I believe in God, so I spend my life in pursuit of God, whatever God is to me. And I said, I feel like because I don't know, because I don't have the clarity that you have, I shouldn't come to shul anymore. And he said, no, this is the time to come to shul. Bring a book. This is the turning point. He said, bring a book. I don't care what the book is. It can be Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and just come and start reading. And if you find yourself being pulled out of the book, pay attention to what's pulling you out of the book. And therein lie the roots of your Jewish identity. Jewish identity is like a table. It needs 3 legs to stand. You get to decide for yourself what the 3 legs of your table of Judaism is. So I brought a book. I started reading.
What was the book? Do you
Harry
remember?
Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Okay.
And I didn't get past the first paragraph, and I started noticing the things that were pulling me out of the book. The smell of challah from the social hall next door, the traditions, and the music. And then 2 additional things that weren't as foundational at the time, but the sense of community and the resilience, the fact that we were somehow still there, saying the same prayers with the same nigunim that my great whomever was saying for hundreds of years earlier. That really stuck with me. And so I went back to school, and I had a clarity about what it meant for me to be a Jew. And it was still tough. I mean, to learn a German dialect, we watched Schindler's List and Sophie's Choice and Inglourious Bastards and Defiance. Just to learn a German dialect at a college theater program, we watched Holocaust films. We didn't pause and analyze the dialect. We just watched Holocaust films.
Which, by the way, is, I understand the issues with that, but at least students, non-Jewish students, were watching
that's a good point.
Films. Because right now in the United States,
they're not.
Half of the states, they don't even require Holocaust education. So
right. Granted, we were like pausing after the scenes where the Jews were being murdered. Like it was
in bad taste.
Yeah, in bad taste. And Kevin Kline says the N-word once in Sophie's Choice. And we stopped class the next day and we sat in a circle and we talked about how words can be offensive. And I thought, Yes, but watching Jews get shot through the floorboards by Nazis is also not the most enjoyable thing to experience in class, but we didn't stop class to talk about that. And we watched that movie 3 times. So it was the double standards. That was my first time really understanding that there are things that apply to Jews that don't apply to everybody else, and there are things that apply to everybody else that don't apply to the Jews. And then I went on Birthright. And
How old were you?
I kept putting it off. I had shows that I was doing. I was in different productions and summer stock, and it was never the right time. And then I had brain surgery the summer after my junior year,
Which we'll get to.
and then after that, it was really this kind of, okay, well, now that I'm alive, now that I'm living, now that I have my life ahead of me, I want to do the things that I've been putting off. And so the summer of my senior year, I decided to go on Birthright. And it was the most transformational experience as a Jew that I'd ever had. One moment in particular, we were walking through the old city of Jerusalem, and the trip leader, Onit, and I were walking in the back of the group, became very good friends, but still very, very close to this day. And she said, "Do you know what you're about to do?" And I said, yeah, we're, going to the Kotel. And she said, "Yes, but do you understand?"
Kotel is the
Western Wall.
Yeah.
But do you understand, Ari, how remarkable that is? I thought I did, but clearly I didn't. And she said, for 2,000 years, at the end of every Passover Seder, we would say next year in Jerusalem, which I always interpreted as, all right, everyone who's at this Passover Seder table, next year, let's all get a flight to El Al, and we'll go to Jerusalem and we'll do Passover there. I didn't understand that it was like when pigs fly or when hell freezes over next year in Jerusalem. And she said, the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust never made it to the Kotel. Your grandfather never made it to the Kotel. And yet here you are. And for 2,000 years, the closest we could get to the Kotel for Jews in the diaspora in particular was building our synagogues to face Jerusalem. But here you are, walking the stones that people for 2,000 years said, next year, next year, next year. And here you are, and you're about to go and touch this place and breathe the air of this place that 2,000 years of your ancestors couldn't get to. And when I got there and I put my hand on the stones, I didn't feel the presence of God, but I felt my ancestors on my hand. I felt every Jew in the world who was standing and praying facing the spot where I stood. And I thought, I am doing the thing that thousands of years of Jews have yearned for but couldn't do. And yet here I am doing it. And that was the moment where I realized I don't want to make myself small so that the non-Jews feel comfortable. I want to do the things that my ancestors couldn't do. I want to be the person that they couldn't be for whatever reason. I want to use my voice to be their voice. I want to live my life to make them proud. And that was the moment where it just became so clear to me. This is the Jew that I am. I am the Jew for my ancestors. I am the Jew who lives my life today to honor the people who came before me, so that the people who come after me will have a better world than the one that I was in and the one that my ancestors were in.
You're the chain in the link.
Yeah.
Jew.
Yes.
I want to, there's so many things I want to unpack this, but I want to go back to where it started, which is, when did you go back to seeing yourself also as an activist, right? Because you said instead of activism, you search for your roots. It sounds like you found your roots. Mm-hmm. How did you find your way back to speaking up?
It was really after I got back from Birthright. And after I had that moment, I realized that I had been laughing at, self-deprecating Jewish jokes and making myself small so that the goyim in the room, the non-Jews in the room, felt comfortable. Because, the not Jewish enough to Jewish matrix, that like if I if I call out of rehearsal in school to go to Shul on Yom Kippur, I'm now too Jewish for the non-Jews in my department. But if I go to Shul and I'm not fasting, then I'm not Jewish enough for the Jews at Shul. And I realized I spent a lot of time trying to be the right kind of Jew for Gentiles, the kind of Jew that was palatable, the kind of Jew that was not too much, the one that was like, oh, he's cool, like he's a Jew, but like,
He's the right kind of Jew.
Yeah.
I used to be the right kind of Jew in academia.
Right.
I was even more the right kind of Israeli.
The right kind of Zionist.
No. You couldn't use the word Zionist.
The right kind of Israeli. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But then I went to Israel and I had that moment at the Western Wall, and it shifted that I didn't want to be the right kind of Jew for the Gentiles. I wanted to be my own kind of Jew for my ancestors and for myself. And so I came back, and things that I would laugh off, jokes that I would dismiss, things that I would say myself so that, people would, I could laugh at myself before I let other people laugh at me. And things institutionally at my department that I let slide, I wasn't tolerating anymore. And that was the first time I found my voice in a way that was, I see something that's wrong. And rather than swallowing my pride and swallowing my integrity as a Jew and letting it happen because I want to be the cool Jew, it was the first time that it was like, what you're doing is not okay. What you're saying is actually hurtful, and you might not mean it to be, but it is. And so that entire second semester, senior year, I felt like I was fighting a different battle as a Jew every day. And then I graduated and I moved to New York, and it was the first time I felt like I had come home. I often say that I'm very proud to have been raised in Ann Arbor. I love my hometown, but New York is my home. I'm a New Yorker who was born in Michigan. But to finally come home and feel the vibrancy and the vitality of the New York Jewish community, and to see other people who were fighting similar fights and doing it in ways that I was very inspired by.
Like who? Who inspired you?
Oh, boy. I mean, Dara Horn, Deborah Lipstadt, Tova Feldshuh, people who used their God-given gifts, not even God-given gifts, but people who were using their gifts, the thing that they were put on this earth to do, to fight these fights. It wasn't just about...
Not just a social prejudice, it's a conspiracy theory. And I think if you look at a long history of anti-Semitism, which goes back to ancient times, what you really see as the through line is denial. It's the denial of truth, the promotion of lies, the denial of Jewish experience.
I realized that I could use my art as activism. I could use my singing voice to be a voice for truth and for reason and for nuance and integrity. It wasn't just about fighting this one thing that's happening in this one moment. And to be a part of the, Broadway community, to walk down the streets of the theater district and see names like Niederlander and Schubert and Gershwin and Sondheim and understand that, and Rogers, and understand that these are buildings and institutions that were built by Jewish immigrants or the descendants of Jewish immigrants. And here I am, somebody with a newfound appreciation for honoring ancestors, both my own that I'm related to, but also ancestors within the musical theater community. That really was fuel to understand, how can I be an artist and an activist at the same time? How can I use my artistry as fuel to fight for what is right and good and just in the world?
Here's where I get depressing, and I'll tell you what. Zach Sage Fox has referred to himself as Winnie the Pooh because he's so happy and delightful. And we were on stage together once, and he said, "And Shai is Eeyore." And I think we all play a role. I, as a kid, loved Eeyore.
Sure.
And that was my favorite character. And you can't have Winnie the Pooh without Eeyore.
It's
or
true.
the other way around. But I do have to be the Eeyore here.
Do it.
you came to New York. You are a New Yorker who was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You are inspired by the Jewish life. It's the biggest Jewish community in the world. You know, the city with the most Jews, not outside of Israel, in the entire world. Yeah. You are on Broadway, which is a fundamentally Jewish institution, and you experience heartbreak. What is that heartbreak? What happened to Broadway?
You're Eeyore. I am Tasmanian devil when it comes to the righteous anger that I feel towards certain people in the Broadway community.
Let it all out, Taz. You don't have to say names, by the way.
No, I'm not.
But I think
people
listening, watching, they want to know.
They want to know.
They should. You
know.
have the experience.
Yeah.
I can tell what's happening in academia, and I have.
Yeah.
You have been talking about what's happening in Broadway.
Yeah. You know, what people don't understand is that Broadway exists because Irving Berlin was born Israel Baleen, and he was born in Russia, and he and his family fled Russia and came to the United States after his village was burned to the ground during a pogrom. And he came here, and one of his earliest childhood memories on the Lower East Side of Manhattan was standing with his family and watching Americans pass by. And he said he felt like he was standing there watching Americans while he was wearing his Jew clothes. This is the man that wrote God Bless America. This is the man that wrote White Christmas and Annie Get Your Gun. He left a place where he didn't belong, and he came to a place where he didn't belong because Jews were not allowed at the country clubs on Park Avenue. And so they built their own country club that we now refer to as Broadway. He's one. Then you have the Gershwins, and you have Harold Arlen, and Yip Harburg, and Stephen Sondheim, and Richard Rodgers, and Stephen Schwartz, and. And so to have people show up to work at places, at buildings named the Gershwin, the Hirschfeld, the Niederlander, the Schubert, the Richard Rodgers Theater, and to know that they wear keffiyehs, to know that they support the fucking encampments, to know that they want to globalize the Intifada, you are spitting on the memory and on the legacy of Jews who built the very institutions that put money in your pocket and allow you to pursue, follow, and live out your dreams. Fuck you. Fuck you.
But they would say something else. They would say,
I'm sure they would.
They would say, you and I share a stage. You are Jewish. I have no problem with Jewish. I don't like, I love them all. It's Israel that is the problem. I'm wearing the keffiyeh because of Israel.
And I would say, do you boycott Chinese restaurants because of the way the Chinese government treats Uyghur Muslims? Do you have the same vigor in your protesting towards Russian restaurants and Russian-owned businesses? And if you really have a problem with the way Palestinians are treated, where's your protesting of Bashar al-Assad and the way Palestinians were treated by the Jordanian government and the Lebanese government and the Egyptian government? If it really is just Israel, then by all means, join the Israelis who are protesting their right. They have the right to protest, and they are exercising their right to protest the government in Israel. But you cannot deny and or question Israel's right to exist, and only Israel's right to exist, and then come to me and tell me that you're not an anti-Semite. Fuck you. That's not how that works. You don't get to decide what an anti-Semite is, you non-Jew. You don't get to do that.
Have you had these conversations?
Yes.
And how do they go?
They sputter, and then they start spewing the same rhetoric like, well, Intifada means uprising. And I'm like, yes. And the Holocaust is just a great burning. Language changes based on historical context. The South, like in that play that I just did, the South Will Rise Again, is just merely a call for Southern economic prosperity. Just like how From the River to the Sea is just a call for Palestinian liberation from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. No, it's not. No, it's not.
But the thing is that the South Will Rise Again is that moment, and we can talk about that table read that I attended. There's the moment where your character says to a anti-Zionist African-American, half Jewish, half African-American character, the South Will Rise Again is just economic prosperity. To make a point that it isn't.
Correct.
And you could feel the entire room
go.
Exactly. There was no air. And I just waited for the moment to be resolved. And then it resolves beautifully because the character says, how dare you? Exactly.
How dare I? Because that is an offensive thing to say. And we all know that the South Will Rise Again has nothing to do with Southern economic prosperity. Just like From the River to the Sea, at its core, has very little to do with Palestinian liberation and has almost entirely to do with ridding Israel, or what they'll call Palestine, of the Jews from the river to the sea. And if they spoke Arabic, they would know that the slogan in Arabic is From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be Arab. But they don't.
But why is the first statement, which obviously takes the air out of the room as it should, is so abhorrent to people, but From the River to the Sea is this catchy tune that you find yourself like singing in the shower?
I think that people have implicit bias against Jews. I really do. I think that people cannot spot anti-Semitism unless they are trained to see it. Same with Jews, because it's different. It functions differently than all other forms of prejudice and bigotry. It's a punching up, right? So the racist, the xenophobe, the transphobe, they punch down. If black people move into a neighborhood and there's a racist white guy living there, he'll say, there goes the neighborhood, because it has decreased how the racist white person views the worth of the neighborhood. They're punching down. The anti-Semite punches up. Jews control the banks. We control the media. We are part of this global cabal. They are afraid of us. Jews will not replace us. So if people know, I'm not a racist, I'm not a transphobe, I'm not a xenophobe, I don't punch down, but they can't recognize the moments in which they punch up. They can't. It's not something that is viewed as a prejudice that is of equal weight to other prejudices. And unfortunately, in the progressive, I call them the alt-left space, which Broadway very much is, there is this belief that they are morally superior, that their activism comes from a place of moral narcissism, right? They are fighting, in their minds, they're fighting for these causes that are just and are good for the sake of the people who are, for the sake of the people that they're fighting for. But in reality, their activism has to do with themselves. It has to do with, look at how good I am. My victimhood is a currency. Look at how good I am.
Wait, so I want to ask, so first of all, Elon Gold and I had this conversation about punching up and punching down. And my response was, nobody should be punching.
Correct.
It doesn't matter.
I totally agree.
Because first of all, I don't see life or social categories as a ladder where some people are higher than others. Do some people have more privileges than others? For sure. But do they have their own problems and issues as well? Yes. No need to be punching.
Right.
But how did Broadway get to that point? Like that's the Broadway that you're describing now. That's the Broadway of the treating the keffiyeh as a costume, treating the activism as a script that you literally download from the National Students for Justice in Palestine website. Right. And you go and you memorize the lines and you do it. And I understand that. I also understand the Jews that started Hollywood. What's the bridge? What happened?
You know, I think that the Jews, the anti-Zionist Jews, that to me, and I don't know because I'm not an anti-Zionist, I'm proudly not an anti-Zionist, But that thing that lived in me of I want to be the cool Jew, which I believe stems from a place of assimilation, right? Assimilation is not a Jewish thing, right? Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish thing. Judaism is a Jewish thing. And assimilation is a result of anti-Semitism, that we have to either choose to assimilate or be annihilated. We have to annihilate our Judaism, right? And assimilate. We have to take off the coat of the Jew and be more American than Jewish in order to fit in, or we annihilate the lives that we want and we own our Jewishness at a cost. And I think that for once you have multi-generational, lineage of people who have made it very clear that their Judaism, for whatever reason, is less important than X, Y, and Z, then you have people who it has been drilled into them, be the cool Jew, be the palatable Jew. If you look around in the room and all of the Gentiles are saying Zionists are bad, and you have it in your heart that you want to be the cool Jew, then you say, look, I'm a cool Jew. I'm not like them. I'm not a Zionist. No, I'm cool. Which I think still stems from assimilation and anti-Semitism. But for the non-Jews, where this comes from, specifically in the theater world, I think that there is this, it's funny because many of them, in terms of their gender identity, identify as non-binary, right? Except many of the ways that they view the world is through an incredibly binary lens in which there is no nuance, there's no gray, there's black, white, right, wrong, oppressor, oppressed. And because they are on the far left and they are activists and they fight for the underdog, they view Palestinians as the underdog and Israel as the white oppressor that must be demolished. It's wrong. That stems from Iranian propaganda. Thank you, Khomeini. But they don't know that. And if we try and tell them that, they won't stop and take a second and reflect. Oh, I could be wrong, because their activism comes from a place of moral superiority. So to say, you have your facts wrong is to say you are wrong, because we live in a world where facts and opinions have become conflated. And if someone says, I disagree with your opinion, people hear that as you're telling me I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, because my activism is attached to my sense of self, then I am therefore bad. And I cannot stomach that. So, no, you're wrong. And I won't listen to you, and I'll just block you, and I won't engage. Why they only do it to Jews? It's the double standard. Things that apply to Jews don't apply to others, and vice versa.
And you started by focusing on anti-Zionist Jews, although Broadway is filled with anti-Zionist non-Jews, I assume, but I assume also there's many anti-Zionist Jews.
Yes.
And I've actually never considered the idea that this is just the ultimate assimilation. That anti-Zionism is that last nail in the coffin, is like, I am fully assimilated, at least in the Jews' views, because as we know throughout history, whenever we thought we have fully assimilated, that just meant that we got the last tickets to Auschwitz, not the first ticket.
Right.
But there's also a dark cloud kind of above all of this, because throughout the years, the percentage of assimilation in the Jewish world and outside, leaving the Jewish community, not the Jewish faith, leaving the Jewish community, has been increasing. Do you expect this to increase? Do you believe in 20 years we'll see more anti-Zionist Jews or not?
If you had asked me that 442 days ago, I would have said yes. But
why 442 days ago?
October 7th was a painful awakening for the Jews who had spent their entire lives being the cool Jew. There's this line in Leopoldstadt, this Tom Stoppard play, that I'm going to paraphrase, but the sentiment is worth sharing, that if a Christian converts to Islam, the world will see them as a Muslim. If a Buddhist converts to Hinduism, the world will see them as a Hindu. But it doesn't matter what Jews do. The world will always and only see them as a Jew. And I think that a lot of token cool Jews woke up on October 7th and saw the carnage that took place, and then watched how the world responded and realized, oh, I've been making myself, I've been curating a version of my Jewish identity that is palatable for people who would celebrate my death, who would parade around cheering for my rapist, my murderer, my kidnapper.
So it's not the carnage, or not just the carnage. It's not the massacre itself. It's the reaction of the world to the massacre.
It's
that
both.
Awoke.
I think it's
the
both.
Jews.
I think because the massacre was what it was, there is no justifying, contextualizing. That is not complicated. What happened on October 7th is not complicated. That is actually binary. That is wrong. That was evil. That was unadulterated, unequivocal Jew hatred. And because it was so bad, to couple that, or to juxtapose that very obvious, horrific massacre with the world's response, not flippantly, but in favor of it, in support of it, that I think was, those two things hand in hand led Jews, and I know plenty of Jews in the theater community who were very liberal, progressive, alt-left activists who marched in 2020 for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and who celebrated gay marriage being legalized and supported their trans brothers and sisters who have been on the front lines for every cause that they could possibly be in support of. And then to wake up and see that day what happened, and the people that they marched arm in arm with celebrating it, that was the moment where they went, I can't keep assimilating my Judaism for people who hate me and who would celebrate my death. Now, the next step that I wish for these people is use your voice. Use your voice. I'm very blessed to be able to use my voice in a healthy way and sing and speak and whatever. I'm the loudest, or one of a handful of very loud, proud Zionists in the theater community. And I'm tired. I'm tired of people coming to me in my DMs and saying, thank you for saying so boldly what I can't. Like, but you can. You're choosing not to, and I empathize with your choice, and I understand where it comes from. But I'm begging you to make a different choice.
There was a moment, and I think this is, I haven't known you for long, but there was a moment recently that I felt super connected to you, and I think spelling it out will make it clear. I attended a table read. We won't say the name of the show yet, but it's one of the best shows that I've never been a table read, and it's one of the best, I can tell you already. And
Amazing.
It's about the dynamics of inside a Jewish family that is mostly Zionist, and then there's the non-Zionist, younger, cool Jewish brother. And you play a character that is clearly inspired by multiple people, but including myself
And me.
and yourself.
Yeah.
And to the point where you come on stage and everyone's complaining about why you're wearing all black. And you say, I'm in New York. You look like a New Yorker on vacation. You say, I am a New Yorker on vacation. I say, I'm a Jew on vacation, but whatever.
Right. Right.
It was hard for me to watch that because it was the first of all, because I felt like, am I a stereotype?
No.
Am I a stereotype of the fighter? But it was hard to me to watch that because you are so angry in that show. And I think you're an amazing actor, but I think you bring that anger. You're not making it up on the stage. You're bringing that anger from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I could see myself there. What do you do with that anger?
Oh, have you been talking to my therapist?
Yeah, she actually gave me a few numbers, a few questions.
So it's a really good question. I think that what's been helpful for me is to understand the difference between anger and rage. Anger is useful. Anger can be fuel to set a boundary, to make yourself heard, to advocate for, to clarify. It's useful. It's healthy. It might not be the prettiest emotion, but it's necessary. When you don't experience anger, when you feel anger and you deny yourself the right or the opportunity to feel it, that's when things can get problematic. Rage, on the other hand, is anger that has been suppressed, anger that has not been allowed to be used and expressed, that has laid dormant and built up and built up and built up over time until a match lights a spark and then it overtakes you and you see red. Rage is not useful. It's not helpful. It is just fireworks. And my therapist said, would you rather be fireworks or fire? Fireworks are loud and they are huge, and sure, they might be a spectacle to behold, but you can't do anything with it. You have no control over it. Fire, you can control the size. You can control you can use it. You can use fire to keep you warm, to cook your meals. It can also be used to destroy, but that's a choice that you can make.
But you see, that's interesting because for me, people talk about activism as fire, but fire plays two roles.
Sure.
You can be the heat or you can be the light. And when you're talking about this, I want to be the light. I don't want to heat things up maybe they'll burn. I don't want to take that risk at all. All I want is to show a light in the darkness where people can see what's going on and go there.
And for me, when you said heat, I didn't interpret it as a dangerous heat. I interpreted it as a sense of warming. So I like being the heat that is a metaphor for a warm place to come to. That for Jews who feel like they are alone and out in the cold, they knock on my door and my space is warm. And they're welcome, and they can hang up their coat and put down their passport, and their wandering Jew can put down the suitcase and feel held and seen and warm and lit up by a sense of community. So to me, I think you do both. I've watched you lead rallies outside of Columbia.
And you participated, yeah.
Yes, because I have felt at home in your presence. I have felt that sense of warmth. Even when it's freezing cold and raining, people still come to be warmed by you. So I think for me, and I would venture to say for you too, we use our anger as a tool. We use it as something that is necessary. It is useful. And if we felt the anger and didn't use it, that would be a different story.
But in the play that you're in, that I watched, that activist anger is not being treated or perceived as a good thing. It's being, in the family context, it's the You're the evil character, even though you have an anti-Zionist brother
I know.
who's throwing the family under the bus. You, for a few moments, become. There's only one act of physical violence in the show, and it's accidental, but it's by you,
I know.
not by the anti-Zionist sibling.
I hear you. And I didn't write the play. We had a lot of conversations about how to, make the play, how to grow it, how to bring it from point A to point B and then from point B to point C. And it's still, being developed, which is why we can't say what it is. But there are certainly moments that I would change. And I think there is a lot of anger. And I would also say that, my therapist says you have righteous anger. And anger in the world of acting, so many acting teachers say anger is not an interesting emotion to play. It's like a painting with a primary color. What's interesting is what is beneath the anger. What is the thing that's happening that is fueling the response of anger? So for me, in that play and in my life, it's betrayal. In the play, I feel betrayed by my brother and by my family for tolerating it. And in my life, I feel betrayed by members of my own community. I feel betrayed by students, people who have been in my home for Shabbat dinner, who have baked chalot with me, whom I've held while they cried. And since October 7th, told me, long live the Intifada, death to all Zionists. And I responded and said, me? Death to me. If I had been in Israel on October 7th and I was taken hostage or murdered or raped, would you be celebrating my death? Not a theoretical Zionist, me. And they saw my message and blocked me. That's one example. But that sense of betrayal, personal and global, is the thing that's beneath the anger. If I just operated from a place of hurt and betrayal, I wouldn't be able to get anything done. But I sit with that betrayal and I let myself feel it and acknowledge the feelings that come up. And then I speak from that place. Only when I've processed it to a point where whatever I'm feeling is useful and can move the needle forward, that's when I speak. But I very rarely speak when I'm enraged or profoundly hurt. My best friend, who is a Zionist and is not Jewish, she lives in Seattle. She's a flight attendant for Delta. She's known me for very, 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 very long time. Yes,
that play.
Natalie. She's the best. Natalie, for listening, I love you.
Natalie, I met you once, but I love you too.
On October 9th, 2023, she got on a flight from Seattle to New York, and she just said, you need a friend, and I'm coming. And 6 months later, she sat down with me after I'd gone to Israel in March for the Tel Aviv Institute. And I got back, and it was so hard to come back. So hard. And I felt rage, was not angry. I was just enraged all the time, and it was not useful. And I was responding from a place of emotion and reactivity and not thoughtful dialogue and, usefulness. And she came to New York and she said, I am on your side. I agree with you. And when I see your content lately, I feel like you're yelling at me. So we sat on my couch and we scrolled through all of my videos. And she said, let's just see which ones I feel like you're yelling at me. Because if I feel like you're yelling at me, your best friend who agrees with you, then it's not useful. And there is another way to say it. And we deleted like 10 videos that were just beyond anger. It was something else. It was, and I
had those moments.
Of course, we have to.
I've actually kept those videos up.
I understand.
Because I'm not perfect. I don't want to try to be perfect. I don't want any activists to feel like if they are going to say something online, they have to be perfect. And yes, if I effed up, and I say effed up because I promised my mom I'll curse less, and that's part of the issue, yes, of course. But everybody does. And Jews shouldn't be perfect. Nobody should be judged by a perfect standard.
And to quote, or, take this is not a direct quote, but again, the sentiment is worth sharing from our friend Daniela Rabbani, who said, we as Jews are learning something that we should never have had to learn. How to live in this type of world. We are learning lessons and relearning and unlearning new and old lessons all at once. This is new and uncharted territory for people of our generation. We have to give ourselves grace when we fuck up. And I never felt scolded by Natalie, ever. I never felt like she was upset with me. She never told me I was doing something wrong. She just said, I love you and I know you. And what I'm seeing is a part of you that I've never seen before, and I get it. But is there another way? And she was right. And then there's some videos that I post, I'm like, I'm livid, and I leave it up because
you posted a video last night. Dan and I, we watched your video on a loop 3 or 4 times because you were embodying a progressive who is against billionaires and is celebrating the assassin of the United Health CEO, and he's like, oh yeah, this billionaire, unless that billionaire happens to be Yahya Sinwar, or the other heads of Hamas and Hezbollah,
right.
And that's a billionaire that I'm okay with. I'm actually gonna walk around with their
hold a picture of their face and march
and call
martyrs.
them a martyr, but not that billionaire who's giving jobs to Americans, and but that billionaire who's giving guns to Palestinian terrorists or to Lebanese terrorists or to Houthis or whatever it is. That billionaire I love.
To go back to a question you asked me earlier about, do I think that anti-Zionist Judaism, Jewish expression will continue? I said no. And there's a second reason which is embedded in this. I think that people initially, and maybe for the past few years, but certainly after October 7th and with the war and everything, I think being anti-Zionist was very popular. And being pro-Palestinian,
which doesn't have to be...
I should say being in favor of the Free Palestine movement, which I think is not pro-Palestinian.
I have gone on record. I am pro-Palestinian.
So am I.
We are pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian.
Which is why I am opposed to the Free Palestine movement, because they care more about destroying Israel than they do about liberating Palestinians. If that movement, if the Free Palestine movement of today and of the past really cared about a two-state solution, or not even that, but liberation of Palestinian people, then when Jews are attacked and beaten in the name of freeing Palestine, then the leaders of that movement would say, that is not who we are. We do not condone that behavior. They've never said that, because that is the movement, and that's not helping Palestinians.
And by the way, and we should hold ourselves to the same standard and be clear that there are too many civilian casualties.
100%.
Too many Palestinians have died. Too many Israelis have died.
Mm-hmm.
And this war is bloody and shouldn't be as bloody.
Yes.
And we can see why this war is
That's
happening.
Right. That's right.
And who is the ultimate cause for it, which
Yes.
is clearly like the aggressor, the ones that started it.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm looking for in that quote unquote movement that I'm seeing on the other side is to say, we think Israel is in the wrong in many ways, and there shouldn't be Israeli casualties.
If on October 7th they had said, Hamas released the hostages, October 7th and the events and the carnage of that day was wrong, the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war is wrong, this world I would like to believe, I'm not a psychic, but I would like to believe would look very different today than it does. But they didn't do that. They were celebrating. And I just think there's something in that. But I think the reason why anti-Zionism will cease to be popular is because the cracks in the movement are starting to show. Exactly what we just said. We hate billionaires unless they're terrorist billionaires living in Doha, Qatar. Then we love them. We want gun reform now, unless that gun is used to kill a CEO. When people start to...
We want LGBTQ rights and women's rights and abortion rights, unless it's for Palestinian women. In that case, we will side with those that are telling them to hide their faces on the street.
And I think that people not in the movement who could have been swayed to be a part of that movement are seeing it for what it actually is, which is propaganda and ideological subversion. It's not truth. It's actually just propaganda bullshit. And I think that more and more people are starting to understand that that's what's going on. And then you look at, the protests that I've been to, the quote unquote pro-Israel protests. We've been saying the same thing from the beginning. We're not talking out of both sides of our mouth. We've been saying one thing from the beginning: bring them home. Bring them home, release the hostages. And October 7th was wrong, and let us mourn in peace. Because we know what we're fighting for. And I think this is what I tell so many people, that yes, it's important to fight against anti-Semitism. But again, anti-Semitism is not a Jewish thing. Judaism is a Jewish thing.
Well, let's get to that, because I want to get to that, and I'm mindful of the time, and I want to make sure, because there are three things that are, you could say, distinct things about you.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, I think they all have some thread that's being connected. During college, you had a life-saving brain surgery, which in a way brought you back to life. Number two, you have been consistently opposing using the word Jewish resilience and getting the word Jewish vitality out there. Again, bringing something to life. And number three, you have a new Broadway show or off-Broadway show that is focused on Jews, and it's calling for Jews to come. Called A Place for Us.
Correct.
Not a place for Jews, a place for us. We can talk about all three of them, but I want to talk about the underlying thing. What is that? You see so much darkness. You have that anger. Sometimes it expresses as rage.
Hamas is not Palestine. For fuck's sake, read a book. I'm angry. I'm sick of being calm, cool, and collected because I am at my wits' end. Hamas is not Palestine. Hamas is an internationally recognized terrorist organization. Hamas is as much Palestine as the Taliban is Afghanistan. But regardless, if you claim to be somebody who fights for human rights and you say that the Israeli citizens deserve it, you don't care about human rights.
But underneath all of that, there's life.
Yes, there is so much life, and that might have always been there, but was laying dormant until I had my surgery. I won't give the whole medical thing.
Your brain was too big for your skull.
Yes, you listened to my live album.
Of course, I listened to your live album. Live at Birdland. Ari Axelrod. You can find it on Spotify.
That's right. And all streaming platforms. But
all my family. It's me, my wife. My son and my daughter listened to it on the way to Ithaca, New York on Thanksgiving dinner.
I'm honored. I'm absolutely honored. But in it, I do this whole thing about my brain surgery, and the medical details are less important than what we're actually talking about. But it was, I was going paralyzed on the left side of my body. I had horrific room spinning, vertigo, dizziness, and it was slowly killing me. And I had 12.5-hour brain surgery, and I was 21. And we know that we're all going to die. Like, we know that that's a thing. We understand that. But to be like a milk carton with a, potential expiration date slapped across your forehead, that does something to a person to look at a calendar and count down the days until the day you might die. And there's a lot of reading and a lot of books and a lot of talks about how to prepare for something like that. There is less about what to do when that potential expiration date is in the rearview mirror. What do you do now that you have the opportunity to live again? There was this...
What do you do if you find out that the milk is not expired and you were just lamenting losing milk, and now, like, what are you going to make with the milk?
Right, that's exactly right. We did this exercise in college where we started on one wall, and the objective was to walk from one wall to the opposite wall in the room. And the wall we started at was birth, and the wall at the opposite end was death. And our job was to just walk slowly and see what it felt like. And by the time we got 3/4 of the way to the opposite wall, everyone in my class started crying. Because as soon as you come up to that wall, the metaphor is this is death. I learned at 21 that if I'm 10 steps in, that wall can move to meet me where I'm at. With that knowledge...
You should cry all the time.
Well, I understood that I could...
See why I'm Eeyore?
Of course! But I could live my life in two ways. I could, one, live in the fear that because this wall can move, I'm now terrified for the rest of my life that the wall could move at any second. Or I could live with the knowledge that because that wall can move, what am I going to do today that reminds me I'm living my life, so that if, God forbid, the wall does move, I have lived every ounce of my life and I have no regrets. So how I, apply that to Judaism and Jewish resilience versus vitality, I was raised with this belief that Jewish resilience was the most beautiful thing in the world. And I no longer believe that's true. Like you said, I believe that Jewish vitality is the most beautiful thing in the world, because resilience connects us to the thing that we are forced to be resilient from. It tethers us to a potentially painful past and forces us to constantly be looking backwards, to allow the past to inform the present. But vitality allows us to remember the past and let it inform the present, so that what we do today informs how we live in the future. Vitality is forward moving. It is about living. I say that there are 3 ways you can move about your life. There's surviving, being alive, and living. Surviving is just simply that. Being alive is a passive state of being. You don't have to do anything to be alive. But living is a verb. It's an action. It's a choice that we get to make every day. And what do we say as Jews when we clink our Manischewitz or our Kedem?
Do it.
What do we say?
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Maybe get a glass
L'chaim.
of water. Yeah, we're drinking a glass of water and saying l'chaim.
And l'chaim is not to resilience. It's not to survival. It's to life. And so for me, as a Jew, I'm no longer interested in that being sort of like this flippant thing that we all say and then move on with our lives. But I'm interested in living in a world where Jews, when we say l'chaim, we take that literally. We go about our day doing something small or big, whatever, just something that reminds us that we are living our lives as Jews. And that in and of itself is a fucking miracle. We shouldn't be here against all odds, and yet we're here. And to remember that and allow that to fuel us to do something, to live proudly in a way that is vivacious and with a sense of vitality, that, again, going back to where we started, that is a way of living my life as a Jew that makes my ancestors proud. Because they didn't survive for us to survive.
And you have brought that to the States. So first of all, if people have not seen you, even a 1-minute clip of you doing Tevya from Fiddler from the Roof, which is, by the way, I would say is a mixture of Jewish resilience and Jewish survival.
Yep.
I just wish that
Tevya
lived today, because he would have been in the protest with us rather than fleeing.
Yes, that's true.
But then you bring that vitality to your show. So tell me about your show.
My show is, like you said, it's called A Place for Us, a celebration of Jewish Broadway. And it is really highlighting the Jewish influence on this art form, both in terms of, how Jewish liturgical music is, hiding in plain sight of songs that we know and love. Like, You'd Be So Nice to Come Home To, which is Cole Porter, who was not a Jew, but he wrote to Richard Rodgers, who was a Jew. And he said, Cole Porter was having a lot of unsuccessful shows. And he wrote to Richard Rodgers and he said, I found the secret to writing hit songs. I'm going to write Jewish songs. So he wrote, for instance, You'd Be So Nice to Come Home To, which is Kupit Yakoi, Jakoi Papirosin, or Voziskavain Uni Tu, or God Bless America, written by Irving Berlin. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans, white with foam, comes from Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon. He took that da 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 da, and he put this recurring bass note. Da 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 da. God bless America. Or Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach. It ain't necessarily so. That's Porgy and Bess, right? So I do those things, like really, just like these are truly American staples of American pop culture that are decidedly Jewish, and like liturgically Jewish. But I also talk about, pillars of Jewishness, of Jewish identity, of Judaism. Lador Vador. Okay, how does Lador Vador manifest in Broadway? Well, Richard Rodgers and his daughter Mary Rodgers Gettle and her son Adam Gettle make up the only multi-generational composing family. Or I talk about the importance that we as Jews put on teaching and learning. How does that apply to Broadway? Look at the way that Oscar Hammerstein mentored Stephen Sondheim. And then I sing a song, putting two of their songs together.
I would even say this, and obviously we're playing into this to the hands of anti-Semites, and I understand it, but some stereotypes are fun to play with when we play with them.
Yeah.
The one thing that every tourist comes to New York when they get a ticket to Broadway, ooh, I got a cheap ticket. I went on the lottery. I was like, that is a Jewish thing.
It's true.
Of I can afford the $200. And I will spend the $200 on food and everything. But if I can get it for $180, I'll do it. Like that is part of it's you do what you need to get by.
That's right.
That is also a very Broadway Jewish.
It is. And the show has taken on a lot of, I've been doing it for a while now, but after October 7th, it really became a very different thing. And I did the show in New York 2 weeks after October 7th, and I threw out the entire script, and I stood on stage in the middle of a performance at the beginning, and I said, I just want you all to know everything I'm going to say to you tonight, I am making up on the spot, because everything I had written before no longer applies to the world that we live in. And it's continued to evolve. I mean, some things really have kind of come into focus and have stayed because they've remained true, and but many things still evolve and still change. So if you're listening and you've seen the show before, or you've seen a video of me singing it on Instagram, I promise you, when you see the show, it will be different.
So I don't know when this episode will come out, but where can people see your shows? Where can they find out about your shows?
So
and there's an album coming out.
There is an album coming out. The album is just a place for us, a celebration of Jewish Broadway. Sing our salvation aloft and in formation, a migratory vie. How wonderful, if that's what God could see. There are songs on the album that are not in the show, and there are songs in the show that are not on the album. So it's a companion piece, but it is not in and of itself, the full show top to bottom. So listen to the album and come see the show, or see the show and listen to the album. That will be released on January 17th, available on all streaming platforms. And then the next day, on January 18th, January Chai, at 7 o'clock at 54 Below, we will be doing the album release concert. But beyond that, the show has really lived in this kind of concert world. And I believe it's time for it to expand and become a true theater piece, like a one-man musical. So I'm working with a director and a book writer, and we are working to expand the book so that it is more of a theater piece and less of a solo concert. And then
it's like Billy Crystal's 500.
Yes,
Sundays.
or sort of like what Alex Edelman did, but with music. And yes, it would be like that. And then the hope is to do a presentation of it for theaters and investors, and then hopefully Halavai, it'll be off Broadway and then Broadway and then.
Well, I am in the corner for you.
Oh,
and
I'm honored.
I'll be rooting and I'll be helping if any way I can. And the people of Here I Am podcasts. Before we finish, I do have to say one thing. When we met at the table read a few weeks ago, and I told you, wow, your character is so angry, and we talked about it, and you said about yourself, not about the character. I felt like I was in a relationship with my phone. And then you broke off that relationship, and then you came back. And I think the difference is you were in a consumer relationship with your phone, and you came back to a creator relationship.
That's right.
It's such a different experience when you are actually an activist on social media, that you speak up, rather than you're spending hours consuming anger and hatred. So
that's right. And I also created a business policy for myself, which is I'm not here to change people's minds. That's not there are people who are excellent at that, and they should do it, and I support them. I'm not interested in changing people's minds. I'm interested in being a resource for people who already agree with me and who might not be able to articulate their thoughts as succinctly as I can, but when they are in the world trying to change people's minds, they can send people my content.
Interesting.
That's what I get all the time from people who say, you say things in a way, you say the things that I'm feeling in a way that I can't possibly put into words. And so I send people in my life who are anti-Zionist, I send them your videos. And that was so relieving to just free myself of the burden of needing to respond to the anti-Semitic people in my DMs and trying to change their minds. As soon as I removed that burden, everything became easier and more manageable, and my purpose became crystal clear. And now when I log on, I know what I'm there to do.
So that's interesting, because for me, mine is I'm not there to change people's mind. I'm there to get people moving, but really I'm just here to be myself. And I'm here
I am.
to show people that you can be yourself. I am not just opposed to anti-Semitism. I oppose celebrity culture. I oppose this idea of influencers, and we need to curate our lives. And and that's why I keep the things I'm not as proud of on my social media, because I am just here to be myself.
Yeah.
So, Ari, I end every episode with what I like to call the Jewish lightning round, a series of questions, quick questions and answers. There's no right or wrong answer, just the first thing that comes to mind. You get one pass, and I get to decide whether you get that pass.
Okay.
So, Ari Axelrod, what is one thing people don't know about you?
I'm ambidextrous. I can write with both hands.
All right. What is one thing people don't know about the Jews?
Our food is actually very good. It's not just salty, boiled things. We have extraordinarily delicious food.
Save something. What comes to mind? What's your favorite?
Malawach.
Malawach. Okay. Which is interesting, by the way. I'm going on a limb. You're Ashkenazi Jew.
Yeah.
I am Ashkenazi Jew. Malawach is a Yemenite Jew food, but it's still us.
Correct.
Yes. And that is something people from the outside
they don't know. That's the thing Jews don't know. That non-Jews don't know about us.
You speak a lot of languages. So what is your favorite curse? Any language?
Fuck.
No, but say it like you mean it.
Fuck.
When was the last time you cried?
Yesterday.
Wow.
I was listening to a beautiful piece of music. I was listening to Pavarotti sing Nessun Dorma, and it just, every time I well up with tears. It is, listening to him sing that song is to be in the presence of the divine, if the divine is something you believe in.
If you could have any person over for Shabbat dinner from any moment in history, who would that be?
Leonard Bernstein.
Leonard Bernstein.
Leonard Bernstein.
Not the Bradley Cooper version.
No. No prosthetic nose is here. No Jew face here. No, he was so proud and outspoken in his Jewish identity and was unabashedly himself. And there's a picture on the wall in my apartment of him conducting. And in one hand, he's taken his glasses off and he's squinting his eyes. And in the other hand, he has arm fully extended with the baton. And it is passion in one picture. And I'm like, that level of passion is something that I strive to have in my life every day.
What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Yom Kippur.
What is your least favorite Jewish holiday?
Hanukkah.
When do you feel safest?
When I'm on stage.
When do you feel least safe?
When I am on the subway.
I hope the governor is listening.
Or the
future
Jewish police
governor.
chief, right. Jessica Tisch, is that right? Yeah.
What gives you hope?
Oh. Dogs and children.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Jewish civil rights?
Oh.
The fact that it's so hard to,
I know.
to pull.
The first thing I felt was I wanted to cry because it would be relief that we could finally stop fighting. And for me, Jewish civil rights means the permission for every Jew to be who they are, and for that to be enough on their terms, and for that to be enough.
Yeah. Finally, every episode I urge the listeners to donate to one charity that does good in Israel or across the Jewish diaspora. Where would you want listeners to donate to today, this week?
The Hostage and Missing Families Forum. Because the hostages are not a political issue. It is a humanitarian crisis. And we were at an event for a small event for social media people, activists, whatever. I hate the word influencer, but activists to meet with 4 families. And the thing that became clear to me, the thing that unfortunately, and I will admit it, I had forgotten, and that you articulated, was the hostages must always be at the center of everything that we do. And what I don't understand, I was at an event for the Broadway community this week, and there was poetry about racial justice and trans rights and dance pieces for, fighting for equity and inclusivity, all of which is important. But no one said anything about Omer Nutra, who was a New Yorker. No one said anything about the hostages, and I was sitting there thinking, how is this okay? This should not be okay. If we're going to fight for people who are needing us to fight for them, then we as Jews and the world must continue to put the hostages and their families front and center in everything that we do.
Ari, where can people find you?
Instagram at Ari Axelrod. My website, www.ariaxelrod.com. It's very easy. And then if you want to listen to my music, Apple Music, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube Music, Amazon, anywhere.
And look for you at
54
Birthright?
below. 54
Oh, 54
Yeah.
below.
January 18th, 7 o'clock. After Shabbos.
After Shabbos. I'm going to ask you to sing a song.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask our listeners to give them a little bonus. But for those that want to log off now before the song comes up, I just want to say how much of a pleasure it is to have you here. But more important, to have you in my life. We are, I believe, more than 10 years apart. You have an extremely old soul. I have a relatively old soul, but in a body that fools people to think I'm younger than I am. I thought we are the
What's that
same
like?
age, but I feel like we're the same spirit. So I'm
We are.
so thankful for having you here in my life, in this fight. And I'm just glad to say, here I am with Ari Axelrod.
Toda rabba, achi.
Tודה. And for those of you that have stayed, one of the things that we feel so strongly about, and I think everybody should, is about the hostages. And I've heard you sing this song called, will you introduce the song?
Yeah, the song is from Les Mis. It's actually the first song I ever sang. Les Mis is my favorite musical. It's by no means the best musical, but it is my favorite. I've been singing the song my whole life. And unfortunately, in the past year and couple of months, it has taken on a very new meaning. So,
What's it called?
Bring Him Home.
Bring Him Home from Les Mis by Ari Axelrod.
Elohai Shema Koli Goralo Beyadecha Eli Hu Tza'ir Shmor Darko Ad Yashuv El Beito Beshalom Beshalom Beshalom. He's like the sun I might have known if God had granted me a son. The summers die one by one. How soon they fly on and on. And I am old and will be gone. 10 Lor's man Hu Tza'ir Hu Rak Yeled Katan Elohai. You can take, you can give, let them be, let them live. If I die, let me die, let them live, bring them home. Bishalom. Bring them home.
Wow. I couldn't stop thinking about Omer Shem Tov. I don't know why. I want all of them home.
Now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.